Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I was going to say this afternoon, it is still the afternoon, I will be joined by Laura Bradburn and Kevin McCluskey for the 4 o'clock kickoff, Dundee United versus Celtic. Now, the last time we were at Tannadice, Kevin McCluskey, it was the magnificent 9. We were all shouting for 10. There's been a few games over the last few years where you look at them and you think we should have got into double figures. And I remember the game against Rangers when we were 5 up after 50 odd minutes. You're thinking, no, I want to beat them 7, 8, 9, 10. And we felt the same against Dundee United last time round, but a lot's changed since then, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Least of all, United's changed manager since then. But no, I don't know if they've improved much in a sense, though. They've changed manager, but they're still struggling down the bottom end of the table. Yep. The biggest difference that you're going to face for United from that 9-0 game, it was something we faced when we played them at Celtic Park in the second game, is that they're just going to be a far more stubborn and well-organised side. I think Jack Ross just didn't know how to organise a team. That's certainly how it came across at that point in the season, because was it FC20, the Dutch side, that put 7 past them?
Yeah.
As well. And then, we'd put the 9 past them. So I think United have probably kind of solidified a wee bit. They've become a bit more pragmatic, but they've still got a lot of the same issues that they had before. And if you look at our side, we've still got a lot of the same positives that we had before. We're still attacking with great intent going forward. We still look like we've got it in us to give someone else another big drubbing. We maybe haven't done it recently, but we're creating chances, and always at the back of the mind, you just think someone could be on the end of another doing. And if it's United today, apologies to Dundee United fans, but so be it. It could happen again.
The thing, though, you've just got to take that ruthless streak that I think Ange has got to actually say, well, I don't care who it is we're playing, right? I mean, it could have been Morton last weekend, and it wouldn't have bothered me if we had taken a lot more goals off of them as well. Laura, can you remember a book back in the centenary season called The Will to Win? And it was a history book, but it was done in comic strip format. Can you remember that?
Hang on. You asking me if I remember something back in the centenary season? What centenary season are we talking about here? Are we talking about 88?
1988, but
I am thoroughly offended.
Well, if you're offended, that must mean that I'm ancient. But you might be aware of something that happened in the centenary year after the event.
Yes,
I'm backtracking here, Laura.
I can go back and study history, ancient history, but yeah.
I meant, obviously. Are you aware of this book that was obviously?
Oh, Paul, you're just digging a hole here. Just
it predated your birth. It predated your birth by several years.
No, it didn't. Well, I'm maybe doing myself too big a favour. Possibly only predated my birth by a few months, but I do know the book you're talking about.
Yeah, there was a point to that, but I've lost my train of thought. Right, no, the reason I brought it up is I'm actually reading that to the wee fella. I think it's a great way to teach the Celtic history, because it is done in the comic book format, and they're right into the wee boys right into it. But quite early on, it talks about Celtic's record victory, and I was looking at it. We know it was 11-0 against Dundee, but I probably couldn't have told you that it was in 1895, right? And obviously, we came up against Dundee United
is
at
that
Tannadice.
when you were born now?
Well, listen, some might say that I knew how good a player Jimmy McGrory was, having seen him in the flesh. But 1895, it just brings it home to you how incredible that 9-0 was. It really does, because, I mean, I'm not saying that football wasn't, well organised or whatever, but obviously that's in the early days of association football, and we tank a team 11-0. You wouldn't expect to be doing that against a team in the same division. But at 9-0, Laura, this season, we were thinking, no, give us 10.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being at it's very poignant at the moment, especially, but I remember being at an Aberdeen match at Celtic Park a few years ago where we won 9-0. And even that paled into insignificance in comparison to this most recent one with Dundee United. I really felt like the 9-0, from my recollection of the one that I was at against Aberdeen, was they held out for most of it and then collapsed towards the end. Whereas I actually think it was the opposite with Dundee United. We had time to perhaps go and equal or exceed that 11-0 victory. And I haven't been paying too close attention to Dundee United recently to know whether they're in quite the same position. But one thing's for certain, they were certainly, struggling under Jack Ross, as Kevin said. And, from a Dundee United fans' point of view, you would hope that they're playing better now. But I think what you said is right. We need to be a bit more ruthless and a bit less apologetic. And if we're going to go ahead and beat these teams convincingly, then, as Ange says, you just keep going and never stop. Now, this might all come back to haunt us if Dundee United come out and give us a game today, but you've got to go on most recent form, and that includes the 9-0 victory that we had, because you've got to look at the history books and say, and go by what you've played before, because that's how you come up with these expectations. Having said that, I remember a game against them. I can't remember if it was last season or the season before, but Leo Labada scoring a reasonably late goal to secure the victory for us at Celtic Park. So it swings and roundabouts in terms of what to expect from teams in the Scottish Premiership, and who knows what Dundee United will serve up for us today.
Yeah, I remember that game well, because it was actually post 90 minutes where he scores that winner last season, Laura, and our viewing figures fell by about 300 instantly. And I don't know who the 300 were and whether they were coming into gloat or not. But obviously this season, Laura makes a good point, Kevin. This season we've had them at Celtic Park. That was the game where Bernabe gives away that penalty where he wasn't even facing the flight of the ball. And again, it was a late show that day. It was 2-2, and we scored 2 kind of last-minute goals, didn't we?
We did. That was a very strange game, if I remember it rightly, because obviously the penalty that they get is an absolute disgrace as far as I'm concerned, and I'll watch it back, and it's one of those ones where I think you can tell me what the rule is, and if the ball hits the player's hand and it becomes a penalty straight away, I think it's a ludicrous rule, because Bernabe's still facing the way that the crossing's coming in, the ball's come back from behind him. I don't think the header's going on target, and his hand's up in the air in a natural jumping position. There's no intent at all for him to hit the ball. He doesn't even know it's there. For me, it's just
I think if you're
decision.
if you're wearing a blue shirt, that maybe becomes a factor as well.
Well, I was just going to say that, Laura, because I don't mind. I don't mind if that becomes a penalty, if that's how it is across the board, if that rule's applied across the board. But then you just need to look at the game on the 2nd of January and that incident. And actually, there's been another couple since then where certain players in blue jerseys have got away with doing the exact same thing, or even having their eye on the ball and having their hand in the way and a penalty not being given. So, yeah, I mean, that was just absolutely insane, in my opinion, that was even given. But, yeah, I mean, that's the game that United kind of came out, and if I can say it, they were a bit like they were in that 1-0 game last season when Abada scored. They returned to being like that kind of Tam Courtsy type team when they were just so well organised and pragmatic in their approach. And we really had to work to break them down. We dominated the game, we dominated possession, but we couldn't break them down so much. But it's the game that typifies this team, because it is that old one. Like, we never stop. We kept on playing to the 90th minute. And at 2-2 in the 90th minute, you actually still felt we could win the game. And we did. And it finished 4-2. The record book says 4-2, and 4-2 is a fair reflection of the game. But yeah, it's that they are that kind of team, United, that you could get the two extremes of being completely disorganised and we can overrun them, or they'll be organised and they'll give us a game. But either way, I think we're strong enough that come the end it will come through and we take the 3 points.
Yeah, you know the thing, there's a few good points being raised, and there's loads of good comments coming in, and I'm going to pull as many of them up as possible. But you're talking about a ruthlessness, a ruthless edge that Celtic have got, and I think it's been instilled in the squad by Ange, and not just the never stop mentality that we have been speaking about for 18 months now, but I think he's been shown it, that ruthless edge in the transfer market, and I think he's also shown it with players that if it's not working out, you can leave the building, Laura. And I'm pretty sure, even though we're sitting here on the 29th of January, I'm pretty sure there'll be a wee bit of action in terms of transfers, mainly out the door at Celtic. You look at Jens, for example. I think he came in and he was pretty impressive. I mean, I don't think he was, Carter Vicker level of defender, but I keep going back to the point we needed him. I mean, we definitely needed him when he came in because he played the 90 minutes in the Champions League. He was definitely needed at that particular point. He's no longer required. He certainly is never going to be guaranteed a start at Celtic. So Ange rips up the loan deal and on you go, son. Well, well played and good luck. And I think that ruthless edge, that streak, is required at the very, very top. It's unbelievable how many ex-players you speak to who worked under a manager like, say, Don Revie or Brian Clough or Jock Stein, and they say that there's a ruthlessness about them whereby they never get too close. I think maybe the exception in Jock Stein's case was maybe Billy McNeil, who never ever seemed to get dropped. It didn't happen. I think he played maybe one reserve game and it was just through fitness rather than anything else. Everybody else did. Jimmy Johnson was forever getting dropped. A lot of that was down to behaviour rather than form. Bobby Murdoch spent some time in the reserves. And I think Ange's got that streak. He's got a ruthlessness. It's not just we never stop in the football park. We never stop developing. We never stop churning the players. And I think Jens is a prime example of that. And I'm pretty sure the comments he's made about Abiel Gar-McCarthy and Eddie Gucci is with that in mind as well, Laura.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that very question on the Facebook group and got a lot of interesting answers. I mean, I for clarification on that, I think some people were assuming that I was criticising Ange for that approach. I love that approach. I think we need more of that at the club. The only thing that I found a bit strange about the Jens one was, like you said, they had featured so heavily for so much of the season and then kind of dropped off the face of the earth and then was immediately out. He's the best example, I think, of that ruthlessness that we're talking about with Ange, where he went from being almost a vital part of the squad to Ange deciding, no, actually, I don't need him. And instead of doing what a lot of managers do and letting him see out the loan spell and using him when required, they just said, no, don't need you, you're out. The Abildgaard one's a bit more understandable because he never really got a place in the team or anything like that. But it's just interesting because I feel like as Celtic, we've got a history of players who have hung about the fringes of the squad, have hung about the fringes. I could name hundreds of them from over the past decade alone, where you're just like, they never made their impact, and yet they were still there for 2, 3, 4 years, just kind of taking a wage and being used sporadically. I am really encouraged to see Ange make decisions and not regret them and go ahead, because it does a couple of things for us. It frees up space and wages for players that he actually thinks will be worth their time. And it also says to players as well, there's a certain element that he expects in terms of level of performance and demand that if you don't meet, there will not be second chances. You'll be out the door. There will be no Derek Riordan. There will be no latter stages Lee Griffiths. There will be no, Martin Comper or something like that who, come for, and regardless of fees that have been talked about, regardless of what they've done previously, if you're done, you're out. And I think personally, a lot of managers would fare a lot better from managing that way, because the other thing as well is looking at the Giakoumakis and Uranovic situations. We've all heard the rumours about, their dissatisfaction with certain elements of the way they were treated, either via wages or via chances to go to other clubs. And just saying, listen, do what you want, but you're not going to interrupt my working process or the atmosphere that I want at this club. If you want to move on, we'll facilitate it, and thanks and see you later.
Yeah, and the good thing as well, I think, is that, some of the players that we're now moving on aren't legacy signings. Ange brought them to the club, and Ange is quite happy to move them on if necessary. I found it interesting, Kevin, just this morning reading that Uranovic did say a lot of the bigger clubs were after him. We spoke last week about, all this interest that was meant to be in Uranovic going to top sides. But he decided he didn't want to be a backup, and therefore he chose his destination. What did you make of those comments?
To be honest, I hadn't heard those ones before now, but it makes sense because he's obviously a very good player, Uranovic. He's a really talented player. He's been used to being a first choice, I think, everywhere he's been. He's 27, 28 years old now, I think. So why would he move anywhere to be a backup, even if it was to a Chelsea or a Barcelona or whoever it was linked? It's a prestige move, and it sounds great. But the impression I got of Uranovic was that he was fairly professional, and he would want to go and play somewhere. He's going to Germany. It's Union Berlin. They're second in the Bundesliga at the moment, so they're no mugs. They're a decent team. Chances are he'll end up getting European football from them at the end of the season, playing in a more competitive environment than he is in Scotland. So I think it's a move that probably does make sense for him. Maybe from our perspective, we could have got more money if he'd went elsewhere. Bigger club might have been able to set up the ante a little bit. But again, as Laura said on these ones, with a player like Uranovic, once his head did get turned and once he kind of decided he didn't want to be here, Ange has acted incredibly swiftly and just moved him out the door, replaced him, moved him out the door, and had that kind of, as you say, ruthless attitude of no one's bigger than the club. If you don't want to be here, we'll replace you, we'll move on, we'll still live to fight another day, and you can go and play your football wherever it is you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, it's an approach, I think it's not necessary for success, but I think having had a period where there was a lot of players that were surplus to requirements when Ange came in, he's worked absolute wonders in making sure that he's trimmed the squad. And then when he sees it getting a wee bit flabby again, he'll trim it again. And I think that there's going to be a lot of bodies in and out of the door under Ange Postecoglou. If anybody's not seen the team, I'll be bringing that up in a wee second, but I'm going to bring up Kevin's predicted team in just a moment, and I'll explain a wee bit more about that. But I'm also keen to bring up some of these comments before we move on to anything else. Stephen Sloan, welcome back to the show. You're commenting on the YouTube channel. For anyone out there who hasn't or yet subscribed to Acsom, hasn't managed to be part of the Acsom cult, then please do click on subscribe. We're heading towards 20.6 thousand subscribers, and we are pushing that up to 25,000. That's our next target. Got some prizes coming up actually next week, so I'll tell you all about them. Stephen is very angry. VAR was supposed to stop the cheating and bias towards Rangers, but VAR is actually helping the corruption continue. The other 11 clubs need to get together and speak out. There's a lot of people unhappy with what's going on. I hope, I really do, and I say this every other week, I hope we're not talking about VAR at the end of this game, right? Because it has dominated. Since it came in, it has dominated so many of our broadcasts because it has been implemented so badly. And then you're looking at some of the decisions and you think to yourself, Laura, that, you know, these words, corruption, cheating, bias, I mean, what other word is it? Because I'm sorry, incompetence doesn't cut the mustard here.
Yeah, I mean, I've not wanted to get involved in discussions about bias and about corruption and all that for years. You know that I've avoided that. VAR, if anything, has led to a situation where it's completely and utterly undeniable. Connor Goldson's basically a basketball player at this point, and as for everybody else, it's like it's hitting you smack bang in the face what we're looking at. You look at the St Johnstone game yesterday, the St Johnstone guy nearly gets his ankle broken, and the other guy wins the ball and gets sent off. If we're supposed to be using it for clear and obvious mistakes, that is certainly not what it's being used for. And by the way, it's not even, I'm not talking about decisions going in Rangers' favour. I think we've tried to be very fair in terms of decisions going in our favour that shouldn't have done. Talking about VAR or not VAR, the situation with Morton last week completely killed their hope by giving us a penalty that I don't think was a penalty. So it's not as if the incompetence only leans in one direction in terms of bias and everything. It's just that the referees, either through incompetence or inability to implement rules properly, they're not doing the correct job. And as the viewer said, as Stephen Sloan said, it's got to the point where VAR has actually allowed us to see their incompetence much more clearly than perhaps we were ever even willing to admit to ourselves. Now, I know there will be lots of people in the comments saying to me, okay, it's been obvious for years, you should have seen it. But I was always willing to be one of these people to be kind of like, well, the referees are trying to observe a match going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's very easy to sit here on the sidelines and say, after we've seen a replay 3 and 4 times, they got that wrong. They are only seeing it once. Now they're not only seeing it once, they're seeing what we all see. They can go and look at a monitor and review it 3, 4, 5 times, and they're still getting the decisions wrong. And that's even if they choose to use VAR, which a lot of the time they're choosing to ignore doing. So, yeah, it's... And the really gutting part of it is when you talk to Jared and the guys over on Celtic Down Under, and they don't understand the controversy around VAR because it's so easily implemented in the A-League over in Australia.
Yeah.
We've made our own mess as far as this is concerned, and it's just utterly making a mockery of the game, I think.
It absolutely is. And anybody from the outside looking in must be shaking their head in disbelief. What is this I hear you say? This was, in actual fact, Kevin McCluskey's predicted side, not bringing it up to say you were right, wrong, or anything else, but just to let you know that, Acsom back in the day did have a very regular blog, Acsom.net, and that is coming back, and it'll be things like this where Kevin will be giving his thoughts. Some of the other Acsom contributors will be chipping in as well. But this was your team, Kevin, and you weren't a million miles off, but there's a few additions in there that perhaps you weren't expecting. You want to talk us through your predictions and what we've actually been confirmed with as being Celtic's starting 11?
Yeah, go for it. Yes, I think looking at in goals, obviously Joe Hart's a natural choice there. There's no real competition. Back four, I was thinking was basically going to pick itself with Johnson maintaining right back. I think he's come in and been pretty solid. Every game he's played for us so far looks as if he's been in the team for years, really, kind of naturally just fitting in, taking on that mantle of right back. Starfelt, Carter Vickers was looking likely to be the backline pairing, with Carter Vickers coming back into training during the week. And once those two, if they're both available, I don't think there's any real choice as to who else plays. And to go back on Laura's points earlier on Jens, that's for me exactly why he's gone, because he's not going to get the game time this season, and chances are he wasn't going to feature in plans for next season if he was to have stayed. So it makes perfect sense that he goes there. And yeah, I kind of thought that this game might have been won too soon for Greg Taylor, and that Bernabei would have been the natural choice to come in or retain the place at left back. But glad to see that Taylor's actually come back, because for me he is the strongest left back that we've got. So I'm quite happy to be wrong on that one, that we've got probably the strongest backline available is out there playing today. Midfield I got right, so give myself a pat on the back for that one. McGregor, Moy, Hatate, the three players that are on form at the moment. Can't really leave out McGregor as the captain, fulcrum of the team. Moy's been sensational since he's come back from the World Cup. I'd had my doubts about him pre-World Cup, but post-World Cup he's been fantastic. And Hatate's just Hatate. He's one of those players that can just change a game in the flick of a switch if he wants to. Up front, Kyogo was the centre forward. Again, I think a fairly easy choice, given that Giakoumakis has got 1.5 feet out the door and O has just come in. So again, delighted to have got that one right, the obvious ones. But I thought, looking at the wing and the wide positions, it would probably go with Maeda. Again, a player that's come back after the World Cup and been flying. His form's been excellent since he's come back. So I was expecting that he would stay. And then the choice would be who plays on the right, if it's Jota or Abada. And listening to the podcast on Friday, I think it was Kev Graham that said it, and I agree with him on this. The choice was really, for me, on that side between, do you want that tricky creativity that Jota brings, or do you want the more direct nature of Abada? And for me, I would have been leaning more towards Abada, mainly because I think Jota's been slightly off form since we've come back from the World Cup. I don't think he's hit the heights that he's previously had. And Abada, I think he's got an average of like a goal a game against Dundee United. It seems to be his favourite team to play against.
Yeah.
Always seems to come up with the goods. So I would have went with him. But the fact that we've gone with both of them does give us the option of, we've got the trickier Jota, who can unlock a defence when he's on his game. And then you've got Abada, as I say, who always seems to turn it on against United. And if you look at the bench, you've got Haksabanovic, you've got O, you've got Maeda, you've got James Forrest, you've got so many attacking options that you can turn to. If it's not working out, you could take all three of the front three off, bring in a new front three, and you give United a whole new problem to deal with.
Absolutely. A few points that I would make, Kevin. I didn't know, I was reading this morning, I didn't know whether Taylor was going to make it or not. The very fact that he has made it has probably decided the left winger's position as well, though, because Maeda, if Bernabe plays, Maeda has to play, because you need someone who's going to give him that defensive backup. The fact that Bernabe doesn't make it means, okay, we can play Abada and Jota in the same team. Laura, do you subscribe to that train of thought?
Yeah, I think our very own Brian in the comments said that he thinks this front three is our best front three, and I would agree with that, with the caveat that as long as Jota's in form. Some have said Jota's not been in form. I wonder perhaps if he's been a little bit hamstrung by the absence of Greg Taylor, and knowing that he's possibly got a bit more defensive duty to do than he would normally like, because as we all know, Jota's not necessarily the type of player that's going to do that for you. So I'm hoping that, as you said, Taylor being in the team has allowed Ange to say, right, well, Jota, you're taking the left-hand side there, and perhaps he'll have that bit more freedom to provide the spark for us that we know he can in these situations. Abada, for me, I don't think he gets the praise he deserves, really. I think he's such a goal threat from the right-hand side. A lot of people criticise sometimes the fact that he's not great at taking players on the outside and swinging crosses in, which you would normally expect of a wide player. But I think if you're going to play so much of the ball down the left-hand side like we do, having Abada as a threat coming in at the back post and getting the goals the way he does, or floating into the edge of the box from the right-hand side, is such a threat for us that I think you just need to alter your expectations of what a right-hand sided winger is going to do. He's not James Forrest, he's a different player, and I think he provides a different threat from that point of view. And that also gives you a bit of flexibility that if later in the game he's not seeing much of the action and we want to change things and go down that right-hand side and swing crosses in, you can look at other options as far as that's concerned in Forest. So I just like the flexibility that it offers us, but I'm glad to see him playing from the start, because I think looking at those three up front, there's goal threat from all three of them, which can only be a good thing for us.
Yeah, Kevin was talking about the kind of strength on the bench and the amount of attacking options we've got. I would also throw David Turnbull into the mix. I think the last 3 games he's been involved in a goal a game, scored a couple himself. And I feel a wee bit for him, but I think he is one of those players that needs to take heed of the fact that Ange has actually come out and said, you're not guaranteed football if you come to a club like Celtic. And there's probably a few players he meant that to land with. Probably Jens, whose agent and parent club were maybe at Celtic saying, this guy's not getting game time. Okay, you can move on then if that's your attitude. Giakoumakis obviously has not been getting it, and he may well also be at the exit door. Hopefully, that will land with Turnbull, because I don't want to see him leaving Celtic, not at this time. 23-year-old, massive potential. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet, but he sits on the bench as well. The game is underway, I believe, so we've probably come on a wee bit late. But before we get to the game, Jake is happy to see CCV and Taylor back in the team. 100%, Jake. We'll settle for another 9-0, and we'll see about that. And also, one final one, Martin Trainer just purchased a couple of tickets for Danny McGrain. It will be tremendous, and you're right, Martin, it is heading quickly towards a sellout. I'm looking forward to seeing as many of you there as possible. Quick prediction from Kevin McCluskey for today's game.
I will be fairly confident. I think we'll win this game 3-0.
3-0, Laura?
After all the bluster at the start, I'm going to go with Kevin, and I'm going to say 3-0 as well, but let's hope for more.
Okay, I'm going to say 3-1, and the goal they score will give us something to talk about in relation to VAR.
We're all chickening out, guys. We're chickening
VAR
out.
at the end of the game. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved. Come back at half-time. Thank you to Laura Bradburn and Kevin McCluskey for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Nice one. Cheers, Paul.